Hey everyone, welcome to Basic Binges on the Nom Talk Network, the only show that encourages gluttony after watching a trendy TV show. I'm your host, Mike Manalo. It's so good to actually, after years of anticipation and hearing that one of the best games ever made, and that's not an exaggeration, that's just a fact. One of the best games ever made was going to make an on-screen appearance, an adaptation, as it were. We finally got it last night with the debut of The Last of Us on HBO. So I'm excited to break that down for you guys, but I cannot do this alone. I am surrounded by such amazing people. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves? Jordyn, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Yes, you all know me. I'm Jordyn Orozco, and I'm a frequenter of Nom Talk Network. But I'm so happy to be a guest with Mike and with my fellow person Kenji here, who I haven't seen in a while. It's good to see you, Kenji. To bring this wonderful story to life, and to finally see it because, like you, Mike, I played this a lot. Geez, God, this was like years ago when I had a PlayStation, and I was so excited to hear about this. So we'll get to it. So it's good to see you all. Oh,
That's
and I have to
awesome.
wait. I have to introduce what I'm eating, right? Like
Yeah,
apparently, like we have to do.
I forgot
So
about that too.
no,
Go
you're
ahead.
good. I'm having a hard seltzer. So funny story. I went to a grocery outlet, and Hard Rock makes hard seltzers, and I was like, I'll try it because they're only $6. Don't get them; they're gross. But it like whatever, drinking it, and then I'm having a lovely little like vegan burger with some avocado, while we
Nice.
talk. So there it is.
That sounds tasty. Not the hard seltzer, but the other thing. The burger sounds tasty. So awesome. Thank you, Jordyn. And we have also got Kenji here. Kenji, what about you, man? Introduce yourself.
Uh, Hello, my name is Kenji. I am an actor and a martial artist. I, I too had. It's been a while since I last played the game, like all the way through. It was back when it first came out on the PlayStation 3. And the thing, I don't know, for me, it's like, sure, play remasters. I don't necessarily play a game more than once. So, however, this series has got me back into it again because and I feel like there's a lot of us probably in the community that are probably revisiting this game,
Mm.
for the
Mhm.
probably revisiting it or possibly even visiting it for the first time because of this series. Probably they want to know a little bit more about it, and I'm excited to be here to talk about it. And I don't have food with me. I ended up eating it in the car, but I am drinking some water out of this really nifty cup, repping my dad's D&D campaign. But yeah, uh, here we are. Here we are. Let's talk. Last of
Love
Us.
it.
I'm excited.
Love it. Stephanie, let's see if we can get water to sponsor us for the next call. I think that would be amazing. I, I just for the record as well, I am also drinking a Coke Zero. I forgot to mention that I was drinking something or eating something at the top of this. I'm not eating anything, but I am drinking a Coke Zero. For the amount of Coke Zero that I chug, we definitely do need a sponsorship from them as well. So just saying. But yes, I love it. We basically already started getting into it, and I love that about this. I definitely want to see first off what everyone thought of it, but also you guys kind of touched on your connection, your personal history with the property itself, with the franchise itself. So based off of the fact that we've sort of gotten into that, I want to also see what your expectations were for the show based on the personal histories that you guys have had with The Last of Us in general, the game. Kenji, I'd love to start with you. Talk about your expectations for the show and what you thought of it overall.
Well, well, I feel like when it comes to video game movie live action adaptations of anything, whether it be manga, video games, comic books, there's a very high expectation set. And when it comes to video games, the expectations have been very disappointing more often than not. Like, I mean, we have the first Super Mario movie that came out way back when with Bob Hoskins and with Dennis Hopper as Bowser. I mean, uh, we've also had all the Double Dragon movies, which as as fun as they weren't. they didn't really encapsulate the attitude and like just how awesome the video game really was. So like to see this game be adapted so well, because Resident Evil has been having a really hard time getting adapted properly. So like I feel like there's a lot of us that had like a very bad like we were very nervous about it, but then to see it, and it's clearly obvious that the writers are very much you know fans of the source material. They want to stay true to the source material, and because of that, it's been great so far. And I'm really excited to see where you know episode 2 goes, because like I want to know how true, because there were moments in this that were like ripped right out of the game. So like to see it's interesting to see how close to the game they're going to be staying with this.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's been a hard and long and uphill battle for video game adaptations. So, verdict, of course, you liked it, right? I mean, overall, you were pretty happy with the product, right, Kenji?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I was too. I think honestly, this is one of the few instances where not just that it was good, but it was so good, like at least for this first episode, that I was really happy with it and really impressed by it. Jordyn, what were your thoughts, and what were your expectations as well?
Yeah, so I will have to be honest with y'all, because in any apocalypse, I have to be honest with my people. I didn't finish the game when I played, in the place, so I didn't finish all of it. I got through like maybe three-quarters of it, and then I just it wasn't, and I did play the remastered because that's how I think I got a PS4 and it was like a slim, and I was like, I just want to, PlayStation, blah blah blah. So I bought it, and I was like, oh, I really want to play it. Excuse me. And what I love about specifically this story is it's not your typical zombie story, right? Like it's not your typical it's not a regular zombie story, it's a cool zombie story, right? Right? Like with like a little bit of flair, right? But it wasn't necessarily about the monsters for me. It was about the story that leads up to it, right? Like from the jump, right? Like you get like at least in the game, you get like the feels involved. You're like, fuck. Like this is the kind of game that it's going to be. And I hate and love games like that because it's like I get so emotionally invested in it that like I don't want to go to work. Like I just want to finish the game. Like I want to know what's going on. Like I want to know what the characters are going through, and you get the character development, and then it like ends, right? It's like Mass Effect, right? Where you have like Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, and then you're just like you're with it through the whole entire series, right? So with this game, um like it was like probably one of the first games that I ever cried in, right? Where you're like playing and you're like, I don't want to play, but I just need to know what's going on. And then once I found out that they were doing like an on-screen adaptation, I was like, absolutely, let's see what's going on. And then it was like Pedro Pascal and it was Bella, right? Where you're like, fuck, like Pedro, like internet daddy, right? Like hot as fuck, let's do it. He's gonna be Joel, fuck yeah, let's do this, right? Then you have Bella, who's like Lady Mormont, right? Like she's fucking like just Game of Thrones, all that stuff, right? I'm like, these people can carry this. Like, let's watch it. Um, I usually go into a video game adaptation like on screen with no expectations, because if I have them with like the thing that I played with and love, it's just going to ruin it for me if I am disappointed. So I went in and I watched it, and I watched it today. And I like sat down and I was like, okay, cool. I'm fed. I'm hydrated. Let's watch this. My cat was sleeping in my lap and I watched it. I was absolutely amazed. It was just the right pace. It was the right explanation. It was to the point where like my mom was watching it for me, and she's like a 65-year-old like woman, and she was like, this is really interesting. And I was like, absolutely. Like you would probably love this story. So I think it was just, I was a fan from the get-go, and I can't wait to see how this series goes.
100% concur with you on that one, Jordyn. For the record, I bought the game when it first came out in 2013 on PlayStation 3, and I loved it. I played a full day, and then checked my status and realized I was only 13% done after 8 hours. And I was so discouraged and so frustrated with that I put the game away and I didn't look at it ever again for years. And then funny thing happened. A literal pandemic happened in the world, and everything was shut down. I wasn't going out, and it's ironic that a pandemic in real life was what encouraged me to play a game about a pandemic, and on PlayStation. So I went back and finished the remastered version. Starting from the very beginning, not the 13% where I left off, but the very beginning. And as soon as I finished it, I did part two. And I swear to God, I never cried like harder in any, playing any video games at all. And I'm usually not a crier when it comes to movies, TV, or video games, in general. You really have to gut punch me to do this. And the games just gut punch after gut punch after gut punch, but it's because it's coming from a place of love, because it gets us to fall in love with these characters. The whole essence, the whole reason that we love the games and why they connect with us so well is because Joel and Ellie, they feel real to us, and they feel we are with them on this journey, so we're endeared to them as much as Joel is endeared to Ellie, by the end of the first game. And as such, I had high hopes for this one, really, really skyrocket high hopes. And those hopes ended up becoming even deeper and deeper and deeper because of all the news that I heard about it. Whether you had Pedro being casted, you had Bella being casted, and both of them were phenomenal actors. I mean, who better to be America's favorite child cargo carrying like badass than Pedro Pascal? But I think the biggest selling point for me was that the showrunner was going to be not only Neil Druckmann, who did the games, for those who might not know, but also Craig Mazin, who is famous. Well, he's done some really bad stuff in his career. I won't deny that. But it all turned around as soon as he did Chernobyl for HBO, which was a phenomenal show. And when Chernobyl came out, people were like, I can't believe the guy that wrote Superhero Movie and Scary Movie 4, I think it was Scary Movie 4, was the guy that did Chernobyl. But Chernobyl was a testament to how good he is when he's not doing a crap spoof movie that he's probably just trying to get paid for, let's be frank. And he turns around this first episode, and everything just felt so familiar. It felt like I'd been in this world already, and I've seen these things, but I'd never seen them come to life. And those sky high expectations that I had, I was so shocked, because it wouldn't have been surprising if it didn't meet those expectations, especially given, as we talked about, our history of video game adaptations. But to exceed them was something I never thought could happen or could be possible, and they freaking managed to do it. So I was blown away by this, guys. I fell in love with this so hard, and just as even harder than I did the games. So I'm in this 100%, 120%, let's say. But yeah, being that you guys are familiar with the materials and everything, I want to see what you guys thought of some of the changes that they made to the way that this starts out, and some of the extra context that we get with some of the characters. I'd love to start with maybe the beginning, from I guess the prologue of the show, pre-title sequence to the introduction of Sarah. Jordyn, what did you think of all that?
Yeah, so I feel like so I'm kind of you have to look at this from like the general audience view, right? Because you have a TV show that like people are like, what is this TV show about, right? Like you have like The Mandalorian, and you have like these people that are in like these other series coming together to make this incredible thing that's like popping up on HBO, right? Like, or HBO Max. And so like for my dad or my mom, right? Like my dad's like, oh yeah, I saw some trailers that were going on and blah blah blah. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't know the story. Like, and I feel like the pre was a really good like warning, right? Like, and also too, I feel like because this isn't a normal sort of like zombie like sort of pandemic film, right? Like we've gotten those already, right? Like we've gotten these, right? This guy was like, there's always that one that's like, oh, I predict this is going to happen. And somebody's like, oh, no, like you're just full of shit, right? And like you get that pre scene where it's like, no, like the best way that like this could happen is if a fungus got like out of control, right? And if the world started warming up, right? Which we're experiencing global warming, right? Like, things could happen. And my mom was watching it. She was like, oh, okay, like that's the guy from the Mummy. And I was like, yeah, it is. But like, did you hear what
It's Jonathan.
yeah, like, did you hear what he just said? I was like, that's not out of the norm, right? Like, that's not like a virus just happened, right? Or like, that's not like a meteor fell from the sky and like infected people. And then all of a sudden it just went like, that's not out of the norm. Like, that's kind of scary. And then all of a sudden it happens, right? Um, and so we get that we get the pre, right? Like we get this scene and the scenes where you have Joel and you have his daughter and the brother like trying to escape because something's going on, right? Like, and I thought that that was done so beautifully, right? Like I knew what was coming, but I was still at the edge of my seat. I was still like, oh my god, how is it going to happen, right? And then like there was that point where like Joel's daughter was over at the neighbor's house and you see the grandma like start to like twitch and freak out, and I was like, oh hell no. I was like, nope. I was like, nope. This is a Resident Evil moment. She's gonna fucking get up. She's gonna, and then, but it didn't happen, right? And then you have like Mercy, who's like the dog, and it's like, oh fuck, something's not right, right? Because all that stuff. And then it happens, right? And then everything that happened in the first like just sort of introductory scene to The Last of Us in the video game sort of played out. I kind of feel like, and to be fair, I played this years ago, so I don't kind of remember this, but I thought it took place like in the woods where like the daughter was shot, and then like he had to like, blah blah, and then it like was like The Last of Us, and then it like fast forwards 20 years later. I was like, I don't know, and then them going through like the small town and like trying to drive through, and then obviously Joel and the daughter getting separated from Tommy. So but honestly I thought for general audiences it was literally the introduction to him, like it was the hook, right? Like it was the hook to this series, it was the hook to what was going on. I was in it and I knew what was going on, and so I just thought it was beautifully done in the beginning. Yeah, they changed some small things, but I like, for me that like kind of didn't remember all the details of the video game, I was like, I'm hooked. Like I'm hooked on this, and this is exactly what I need.
I love it, man. I couldn't agree more, honestly. I think for me, that scene with the grandma, so goddamn creepy, I swear to God. And you're right. You hit the nail on the head. This is not your ordinary zombie show. This is not The Walking Dead.
No.
And I think that it's funny because you could watch a million zombie movies in a row: Dawn of the Dead, Shaun of the Dead, Zombieland, certainly full seasons of The Walking Dead. But immediately from the first couple of minutes of this show, this episode in particular, it separates itself from them. It establishes an identity for itself that I think is really, really unique. And for us who have played the game, we know that the story is unique, but for the general audience who has not seen or played The Last of Us, the original games, absolutely, it sets itself differently. Our Kenjinator has redeemed Take a Bite. I don't have any people here that I can infect, so I don't know what I could bite right now. But no, I'm kidding. But I will take a swig if that's okay. It's essentially a hydrate.
Wait, Kenji, you're on Twitch and redeeming while we're on here?
Yes, I am.
Damn it, Kenji. Oh my god, you're like, Jesus. Okay, hold on.
It does remind me though, just as Kenji did, if you're watching out there and you want to redeem your Nom Talk bucks to make us do crazy things, hydrate, talk in the third person, use crazy accents, anything like that.
No talk in the third person. I'm against it.
Don't tell.
We encourage all of that except talking in the third person.
Don't. You know what? New rule: people that are on stream should not be able to redeem points. That's the new rule.
But people on stream.
No, Kenji, don't. I see you. God damn it. Okay, well, you're talking next.
Okay. No, Kenji didn't, but Nom Talk did. So I guess is that directed at everyone? Does everyone talk in the third person? That's how that works. Okay. Yes, I'm being told yes. So Mike would like Kenji to describe what he thought of the what Kenji thought of the prologue and the with the introduction and Sarah within the show. Kenji.
So Kenji thought that the intro was pretty good. I mean, when Kenji was first seeing it, obviously the prologue that he saw was not the one from the video game, but it definitely did give more context to people who haven't played the game like Kenji has. So it definitely, when you're playing a game, you get you get to find this information as you go along, but actually the information that we're even getting in this introduction is stuff that we haven't even heard in the video game itself. So Kenji was really surprised to see that they kind of took this turn, this angle, so that the general populace could better grasp what's going on, for sure. And then of course he saw all the different all those moments that were taken right out of the game. Like it was those moments made him go, oh wow, this is really cinematic. And so the fact that it was actually it's that moment, he Kenji likes to quote often, if the wheel isn't broken, if it's not broken, don't fix it, kind of thing. And the whole idea, and it's true, like that moment played out so well in the game. Why wouldn't you just do it shot for shot, I guess. I mean obviously they took some liberties with it, with the whole with the Adlers, the next door neighbors, and which I feel like that is that works out much better on screen, as a series would, than to play in a video game. Because in a video game it needs to go like this immediately, and you have and you as the player have to be like oh shoot, okay, now things are starting to happen, sort of thing. It's meant to engage the player, where in this case this is meant to engage the viewer, and it's now a completely passive medium. So I feel like it just worked out so well. Oh no, I messed up. Kenji feels that he
see what I mean? See what I mean?
But Kenji thinks that that it was actually really, really well done. And what was it? Is it Oscar Luna? The one who plays Tony.
Gabriel Luna.
Tommy, sorry. To Gabriel Luna, sorry.
Gabriel Luna.
There's so many Lunas, it's hard to keep track of all of them. Gabriel Luna. He's playing. He just did a phenomenal role as Tommy. I feel like he's really doing his best to make sure that he does a really good job, because the thing is, he's actually a phenomenal actor. He was the Terminator in the most recent Terminator film. A lot of people didn't like it, but I thought he did a pretty good job in that. So I feel like he's really trying to show off more. He's just I'm not just this stoic kind of machine, which doesn't really offer him a lot of range, but this character is really giving him an opportunity to really dig his teeth into it. And I think he's doing a fantastic job. Honestly, everyone's doing a fantastic job with Pedro Pascal, doing an amazing Joel. So far he's doing an amazing job as Joel. Really, he clearly understands the character. And also congratulations to the girl who played Sarah in the intro. She did an amazing job, because she makes you, we know what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen, but for the people who don't know, they did such a good job to establish her as the protagonist, as the eyes that we're supposed to be seeing this show through, and then to do the rug pull, the way that they did. Obviously, like I said, take beat for beat from the game, but still she did a fantastic job. give, make to portray a character in such a way that we do fall in love with her the way that we're supposed to.
Yeah.
So props to that. Props to that actors.
Speaking of fantastic jobs, Kenji, amazing job with the third person for the time period that it was on. I know that we got the signal that we could turn it off, but for the entire time that it was on, you did a killer job, my friend. Well done. Well done.
Took one for the team. I told you.
Yes, you took it for the team. Thank you for doing that. Jordyn, we definitely tried to be merciful, not have you do it. But no, it helps that Kenji carried the burden of that one. So thanks, buddy. Well done. To respond to everything that you just said, agreed 100%. Nico Parker, I believe, is that the name of the young actress that plays Sarah? Thandiwe Newton's daughter, who is just as talented as her amazing mother. Actually,
that's Sandy Newton's daughter.
Yeah, Sandy Newton's daughter. Right? Like they're dominating HBO because like Sandy Newton, I don't know if she changed her name to Thandiwe, but whatever. Sandy Newton. I love her as Maeve. I love Westworld. I loved her character in Westworld. I didn't love all of Westworld. But she did a great job, and talent runs in the family because her daughter just crushed it as Sarah. I think that was one of, and you're right, Gabriel Luna. Man, he nailed the voice of Tommy. He sounded exactly like Tommy. He looked exactly like Tommy too. It was freaking brilliant. And I can't wait to see him. If you played the game, Tommy does eventually show up again later, potentially. And without spoiling anything. So we're not done with Gabriel Luna yet, and I'm glad about that because he's a terrific actor and doing a great job as Tommy. One of the things that I love, yes, I absolutely loved John Hannah's introduction for sure. Kind of understanding a little bit more about how these events are going to come into play, how the cordyceps are actually going to start manifesting themselves within humans and throughout the world, and what that means to the world, the catastrophic feeling and tone and sense of dread that you get just from that prologue alone. That's not in the games, by the way. That was just brilliantly done. And I love that. The other thing that they deviated from the games, which I also thought really enhances everything, greater, was we spend a lot more time with Sarah. Much like, and Kenji, you were kind of alluding to this. It's hard to satisfy, an audience when for most of the game you're catering to the player, right? Like you're playing as Sarah, and that's how we immerse ourselves in Sarah because we're playing as her, and we start the game off playing as her. But you can't do that with an audience, right? So to instead show a day-to-day life, a day in the life of Sarah, going to school, taking the bus, getting her dad's watch repaired, visiting the neighbors. It endears
selling
us to
hardcore
her.
Drugs, selling hardcore drugs,
selling hardcore drugs, stealing from her dad. Oh, no. It endears us to her. So the tragedy is just as palpable as it would be if we played as her in the games. And it's very interesting to think about how they adapted that effect, and how they can get us to feel that. So I thought all the changes that they made were quite brilliant. It actually, I will say this, and this is going to make me sound like a callous son of a bitch, so I apologize. But I'm kind of glad Sarah dies. Because quite frankly, she's a good-hearted individual. She's a very honest individual, and sad to say, that type of person is not going to survive in the world that's to come. The dichotomy, the stark contrast between her and Ellie as characters. Ellie is a survivor. She is tough as nails. She can be vulnerable, but she also knows when to trust people, when not to trust people. She's got her guard up, but she can throw down. And I don't think Sarah can do that. Just from the brilliantly adapted moment, by the way, where they're in the car driving, it made it feel exactly like that scene in the games, which I loved. But when Joel sees the family, and Sarah wants them to stop, and even Tommy's about to stop, Joel's like, no, keep driving. And unfortunately, as tough and as crappy as that is, it's the right thing to do to survive, which is and it makes Sarah cry. So it's very hard to see a world where she would survive the hardships to come, if that's the type of person that she is, deep down. So we love Sarah. I think it's necessary for her to go, not just for the story, but for the future that this world is about to, unveil. But amazing work from Nico Parker, who did a terrific job portraying her and getting us to fall in love with this character. So that hurts just as badly for us as it does for Joel when he loses her. Our good friend Q Ball, by the way, you sent a comment a little bit earlier saying that you haven't seen the show yet. You definitely have to get on that. It's if we're not hyping it up for you, hopefully you don't care about spoilers because we're spoiling a crap ton here. But I'm glad that you're listening. We love that you're listening, and we love that you just redeemed Stretch, which is something that I could use right now. So thank you for redeeming that, everybody. All right. It's a perfect time for us to stretch too, because having gotten past the prologue,
Oh, my back. Okay, sorry.
it does make my back feel better too. Having gotten past the prologue, we can actually start talking about the meat of the show, and where the rest of the show is going to take off from here, which is the 20 years later segment. Interestingly enough, if in case those of you watching hadn't noticed, the show does start out in 2023. So when 20 years later happens, guess what? It's 2023. It's our year. It's modern times. And I love that they did that. They didn't just set this in the distant future of, they're making it feel real. And the craziest thing is, we know that pandemics can happen. We know that lockdowns can happen now. So the fact of the matter is, seeing this future play out in our current year, it's not difficult for us to imagine, which I really love. But they do start everything out in 2023. And we see, of course, that there are different quarantine zones throughout the country. The one that we start out in is the Boston zone. We're introduced to a little girl, and we kind of, her story, I should say, intertwines with Joel's story to a degree. And we see something kind of difficult. What did we think about this reintroduction to Joel and the tone that they're setting with the story of this one little girl? Kenji, I'll start with you. What did you think of that?
It was definitely fascinating to see. Like, it kind of gave us a good way of seeing how this new world is, how she basically has to go through this whole like process when she first gets found, outside the walls, basically. She first gets met by people with guns. Then she has to go through like this whole quarantine process to make sure that she's safe and that she's not infected. So I mean, definitely it's like a nice little dose of of a reality pill for what's happening in this world. And when I first saw that scene, because of what ends up happening later on, I actually thought that was like maybe possibly like a few years before what we see ultimately after the incident with Sarah.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe because of the hair, I thought, oh, that's got to be Ellie. That's young Ellie when she first gets, where she first gets found, gets taken in by Fedra before she plans her escape and comes to the events of the game, and I guess the series. But yeah, that I actually thought it was. I loved the way that they kind of established the setting. I really thought, because I feel like when we were playing the game, there's very rarely that you see like what Joel does in his day to day. It's all because we're playing the character, so like what he does is what we tell him to do, sort of thing. And we to see and to see kind of Joel being an NPC essentially for his NPC life for a little bit, was really cool to see as well. Like I do really love that the how they did set it so that it is 2023, because you're absolutely right. I could totally, it makes it, I feel like it makes it that much more believable. It also hits a lot closer to home for a lot of people, because it's like, yeah, we had what we have, but this is how it could have gone so much more worse, kind of thing. And I feel like it's we could have easily, and how easily we could have come to where we are, and how easily we could have come to that sort of a future if we, so yeah, I thought it was great. All that to say, I thought it was great.
Agreed. And Jordyn, what did you think of it?
So what I love about this story, right, is because with every typical zombie sort of like film and sort of like typical like TV show like The Walking Dead, right? You see people and then you see them sort of trying to build up to like survival, right? Like or building a community. And with The Last of Us, right? Like you don't see that. What you see is you see the crumbling of society at its very early stage. And then what I loved about this is the fact that like you see Joel and there's already a community formed where it's like it's protected already and you're in it, right? Like you're in what people are used to and what they're surviving in, right? Like with for example, the very beginning scene, right? Like where you have the kid who like comes and they're like, "Oh, like we'll protect you, we'll do all that stuff," and then the next scene that you see is Joel throwing him into the fire, right? Where like and that's what's going on, right? And you're like, okay, cool. We didn't we didn't have the Joel from that like first 2003 where his daughter died and then he had to survive all the way up to 2023. You had like 2023 and this is what the fuck life is now, right? And so I think that's very different already. And you're like, okay, cool. Well, it makes sense that there's a rebellion against the government. It makes sense that there's, all this stuff going on, right? And then it also makes sense that there's somebody that's immune to this, right? And so I think that the way that it was sort of like introduced and like what happened after, everything that happened in the beginning, it just made sense to me and it flowed very well, like with this TV show. And like I wasn't even if I hadn't played the games, like I wasn't confused, like I wasn't like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Like what's going on, right? Like when you're watching The Walking Dead, you're like, some of this shit doesn't make sense. Like why are you riding a horse through you know what I mean? And so there's
Yeah.
just things that just don't make sense. But this was just like perfect. It's 20 years later. I can see how society has collapsed. Also, Boston is like going into decay, right? But then you have this one section where, everybody is and gathering and there's factions and there's people against the right. So
Yeah.
it made sense.
I mean, although some people would argue that not much has changed in Boston, but anyways.
No, to be honest, Kenji, you touch on a good point. I mean, when you think about how people were in 2020, basic things like wearing a mask or getting vaccinated was met with resistance. People thought that the government was oppressing them when we were just trying to look out for the best interest of everyone. And imagine, in a dystopian society, such as the 2023 in Last of Us, how people are feeling about Fedra, who is arguably even more cold than the government that's asking us to take care of ourselves and wear masks and for the safety and benefit of others. To eliminate a little girl like the one that we see in the beginning, it's so callously and so cruelly. It establishes perfectly what kind of world this is and what kind of future this is. I thought it was actually quite brilliant, and it reminded me a lot of, in a way, what Spielberg did in Schindler's List. There's a little girl in the pink coat, and you're following her throughout some of the movie. It's the only thing in color in that movie, and then it's the visual symbolism of what happens to her that kind of sets up Schindler's character for the future. Now, granted that this little girl, obviously doesn't have as big an impact as the girl that Spielberg focused on in that movie. But what it does do is through just the use of showing the shoes, we know that the girl in the truck is the little girl that we see in that segment, and they killed her. We know the situation. She was infected and they threw her into the fire. But it also tells us where Joel's at psychologically these days. The very different nature of a man who lost his daughter because of this, because of the events in 2003, and where he is today. How much I wouldn't say colder. Well, no, colder. How much colder he is today because of the way that the world has fallen, the world has changed. And I think it's very important that they establish and introduce audiences to this reality, to this future, and how this world is. Because we've got such limited time, I'm going to jump ahead quite a bit. We get to meet Tess in a little bit later down the line, and also kind of understand a situation forming a situation that has been present, I guess, between a paramilitary group called the Fireflies, and of course the governments that control the quarantine zones, Fedra. What did you guys think about a lot of? Okay, it looks like Cue Ball redeemed sing mode, so I apologize in advance for this, guys.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, am I reading that correctly?
You are reading that correctly. Wait, is that how sing mode works? We just sing everything that we're saying? Oh, crap. Okay. You are reading that correctly.
Yes, it is.
We will be discussing all of this in Sing Song going forward until Nom Talk tells us not to. So thank you for that, Mr. Cue Ball. Thank you for making our lives a little bit more difficult. But that being said, this is the show and we want to make it entertaining for you. So let's talk about Tess and the Fireflies and Fedra. We will start with Jordyn. I apologize in advance for that. What did you think of how Fedra and the Fireflies and Tess are all introduced?
Oh God. Okay. This is a first. So I feel like the way that they were introduced was very sudden, and I'm usually a better singer than this. But I was not disappointed with it. I feel like it could have been a little bit better, but I feel like it added to the story because there was a little bit of mystery, and it was fine because as we continue the story, it kind of made sense. And then we kind of saw, because I wasn't sure if Joel was a part of them. But then when Tess was in his bed after he took the drugs and he drank all the alcohol, I was like, okay, you are. And then once it was introduced, she was like, the first scene that we get with her, she's captured with some dude who clearly is just like an outlaw, and she's like, blah blah blah, and then the Fedra comes and is like, oh hey you, and she's like, I'm not a Firefly, and she's like, I spent all night in jail, and then Pedro Pascal's like, I don't give a shit, and then they wake up and then they're like, we got to get the battery back from this dude, and so for me, I was like, cool, I get it. Which is why I was telling you, Mike, there's factions, and it was very sudden. But if I was an audience member, I'd be like, cool, I remember that it's 20 years later than that. And it made sense.
Jordyn, that was wonderful. And that was way worse than third person. I hope. Oh, it says you're good. I think we could stop. So,
thank God.
Yeah, I think we can stop.
Okay.
Thank God.
I'm gonna just do it in brief. Yeah, so it was really weird because Tess gets introduced and then we get the Fireflies, and I'm like, wait, this isn't like Joss Whedon. Like this isn't like what's going on. And then I was like, oh, like I remember, great. And then we find out that that's where Ellie's being held, but then that gosh, I can't remember the leader of the Fireflies in the area.
Marlene?
Marlene, thank you.
Yeah.
Marlene is like, we're keeping her for specific reason, and for those of us that have played the game, we're like, we know why. Like, we know why you're keeping her. But for those in the general audience who are like, what's going on? Like, there's some secret going on. And then we find out that Pedro Pascal, and like he's not really connected with them, but he's like, okay, like I've done shit for you, and he does shit on the sly. And Tess is definitely like, oh, like cool. And so I feel like I said, it was very loosely introduced, but at the same time, I'm like, this is 20 years later. Like there's been some resistance to the order that's sort of been held in these areas. And then you have to kind of think like, it's not just Boston. Like there has to be some other areas in the world that have like become this. So
Agreed. And also, Jordyn, a couple of things. I want to compliment you on absolutely crushing the singing portions. You carried a lot of that weight, so thank you very much for that. You also have massive applause from Cue Ball, who thinks you have a very good singing voice, and you do. Cue Ball's absolutely right about that. Cue Ball, that was just for you. And in hopes that you will never redeem that ever again. No, I'm joking. But seriously, anyways, yeah, Kenji, what about you? Tess, the Fireflies, and Fedra. Go.
So I feel I definitely, I understand how they had to, the way that they're introduced in this is obviously different than the way that they're introduced in the video game because, you know, it it's a different medium, it's a different medium, and so this way it works a lot better. I feel definitely for sure, and same with like Tess. With Tess, when we first meet her, it's kind of like one of those. She seems very much like one of those like, oh, this, she, she's a badass because they clearly have a history sort of thing, as opposed to we actually see her doing, basically living up to her reputation a lot more than we really get to in the game. And I definitely enjoyed the introduction, the way that they are handling the characters for sure. Like, we've seen as a video game fan, we have seen such severe departures from characters that are clearly been established in the medium, and it's like, this is a good character. Why are you changing this character? So to see these characters be treated so well, I think is just phenomenal, and I mean, even with like, I think the actress who plays Marlene actually is the voice actress for
Yes.
Marlene.
Yep.
Yeah, so which is crazy because that rarely ever happens where you have a guy where the voice actor really fits the, you know, the physical embodiment of who you're going for. I mean, that's why they're voice actors, So you don't have, they don't have to be seen. That's the whole point. But like, so the fact that this person was able to really, you know, so the fact that they were able to bring that person back, first of all, and they're killing it so well, it's like, that's, first of all, that's fantastic. I'm really hoping that, just for the actress's sake, that's not the last that we see them. I really, really hope that we get to see more of them. But yeah, I think that the way that they're handling these characters so far has been phenomenal.
Merle Dandridge, definitely huge props to her. She's such a good actress, actually. I don't know if you guys, as Last of Us fans, recommendation, if you ever get the chance to see, they put out a featurette of her doing the performance capture with Troy Baker, alongside Troy Baker, and it's the final scene of the game. And they tell Troy Baker, just keep acting no matter what happens, what crazy thing happens. And they're planning, Druckmann and Merle Dandridge are planning a prank, and they play out this very serious hospital scene, which we see at the end of the game. We're not going to go into details or of what any of that means, but she starts breaking into song opera style, not unlike what we did a couple of minutes ago. And she's got a phenomenal singing voice. But then Troy Baker, who's kind of confused about what's going on, he just plays along with it and he starts singing. He's got this operatic, like Phantom of the Opera voice. You guys have to look it up. It is amazing. It is phenomenal. It's well worth the amount of time that you spend watching it. So huge props there.
Troy's the one that did Booker, right? In BioShock Infinite.
I think he did. Yeah, he was also Booker. God. Troy Baker's brilliant.
He's fucking phenomenal. I became obsessed with him after that game because I was like, who the fuck plays this hot ass voice? And then like I looked it up, and there's like YouTubes of like him and the voice actress that played Elizabeth in that, and they're singing "Will the Circle Be Unbroken" together, like just on guitar, and he can play guitar and just doing it, and he's just phenomenal. And the minute that I found out that because he also did Uncharted, right? Like he did.
That was Nolan North, I think, or was it Nolan North?
That's right.
Well, no, he does. He plays Drake's brother. He plays the older brother.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Uncharted, and I was like, "Fuck, this dude gets around, right?" So anyway, sorry. Like,
he's basically Nolan North when you can't get Nolan North.
Basically,
it goes Nolan North, then Troy Baker, then Steve Bloom, and then you kind of go to whoever else needs.
But we don't give enough credit to these voice actors who just do a phenomenal job. And I'm glad that Merle Dandridge, as you pointed out, Kenji, it's a rare instance for any voice actor to actually portray the character in live action. But I'm glad that she got to do it. I do hear that we will get Troy and we will get Ashley Johnson later in the season of the show, playing different roles. Obviously, Ashley Johnson, who we love as Ellie, the original Ellie, I think she does not look like a 14-year-old girl, so you might have an Evan Hansen situation there. But she's brilliant actress.
Sit
down. But she is brilliant, and I am looking forward to seeing her and Troy with actual roles in this as well. But you point on some good points, Kenji. The way that they really set us up with Tess and how badass she is. Anna Torv, by the way, what a great person to play Tess. If you're a Fringe fan, you know that she could bring the toughness, and that's what she brings to Tess. Seeing her get the crap beaten out of her in this, she always does phenomenal work. I know that we're running very low on time. I do want to get to the end, the introduction between Joel, Ellie, and Tess, and the quest that Marlene kind of puts them on, as well as a very special revelation about Ellie. What did you guys think, and how do you think that this was handled in comparison to the way that it played out, I think, in the games? Kenji, we'll start with you.
Well, this essentially played out almost exactly the same way. The only difference is that, gosh, I just completely drew like, was it Meryl? No, not Meryl. Was it Meryl? Marlene. Sorry, Marlene.
Yeah.
Marlene. She, the difference being that she's bleeding out in this scene in the series as opposed to being completely fine, in the game. But I mean, like other than really subtle differences, and I read really nuanced differences, it's essentially the same. It's essentially the same beat for beat, and I definitely I do however like how we see more of Joel's character in this moment, though, in this moment than we do in the game, because this moment in the game, I think it's essentially just to teach you how to use melee combat. So it's a very, very short played moment. However, in this version, obviously in this series, that's a big moment. That is the moment where this very, very reluctant guardianship becomes kind of solidified in a way, where it becomes it's essentially where he says he essentially fully accepts the burden that this is going to take, that he's about to face. And I feel like it was I think it was handled so much more emotionally with a lot more emotional depth this time around than we saw it in the series. But still, though, I feel like it was just executed perfectly. I wouldn't change anything. No changes here.
Me neither. Well said. Jordyn, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was a good mix of we get to sort of see how Ellie really isn't afraid of Joel and how Joel is just like, who the fuck are you, right? Versus, and then we get that later scene where, there's a parallel between, the him and his daughter and the trooper about to shoot Ellie, and then he's like, nah, I'm not gonna fucking do this again. And then it's sort of like you make that connection where you're like, okay, like we can see how this is gonna sort of like play out. And then you see Tess, get the machine and figure out that like she's infected, but then Ellie's like, no, like it's 3 weeks old, like I haven't turned, like it takes a day. And then they're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, oh my God. And then it's sort of like it happens really quickly. And then what I thought was really cool was the radio signal, and how Depeche Mode came on, and then it was like, 80s like music, and it was like, no, you can't go. And then all of a sudden you're hearing all of the clickers like go off, and then the whole fucking series ends. And so I feel like it was a good, like it was quick, but also I feel like if you were following the whole story, you picked up on everything. And I feel like it was a really good, like, oh shit, this is going to be a really good series, right? Like, we're in for some really heavy, things going on. So I thought it was great.
I did too. I think for folks who haven't played the game, the revelation of Ellie being infected but not really is going to be like, oh shoot, and they introduce her and her and Joel's dynamic and relationship in such a brilliant way. I think they show that she's whip smart, she's very very savvy. Just having him, having tricked him about finding out what the codes are with the radio was a really nice touch. I also can't. I there's no way I can end the show and not touch upon a big whopper of an Easter egg for fans out there when Marlene kind of talks to Ellie about the point of view of Fireflies being terrorists. She does a name drop. She goes, "Was Riley a terrorist?" And for those of us who played the DLC Last of Us Left Behind, we kind of know what that means, and I'm half wondering if we're going to see a little bit of that somewhere later on in this season. But for those of you watching out there, I just want to preface this by saying that name Riley, this is not going to be the last time that you hear it. So hopefully you guys pay attention to that down the line for the future. I think we do have a little bit more time left. So I do want to touch on one final topic, if I can, which is just the performances of Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey and your overall thoughts on their portrayals versus maybe Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson's. What did you guys think that they brought to the performance and the role? And do you think that was there something different that you guys really caught on to or that really worked with you for them that you didn't potentially see in the game? Jordyn, I'll start with you.
Ooh, okay. So I was like, are they going to touch on this? So I thought the Joel in the video game was a little bit hotter. It was a little bit like, hey, I would for sure want him watching out for me, but also too Ellie. Ellie seemed a little more like, for those of you that play the Telltale Walking Dead games, she seemed a little bit more like Clementine to me, like in the video game, where she was a little bit more innocent, a little bit more like not as like hard ass as this. And I feel like in the video game, Ellie became more hard ass as she stayed with Joel. But this from the bat, I was like, whoa, like what's going on? Like it was a lot. And maybe I'm just like a true like one of those like purists, right? Where I'm like, no, like the original video game. but I feel like the original the growth of the original characters in the video game was a little bit more how do I like it just explained more as you played the
Mhm.
game.
Yeah.
In this one, I get it. Like you have to sort of like you have to introduce them, you have to do this, and Ellie does have to be hard, to some extent because that's what's going on. So I felt like there was a very different contrast, but at the same time, I feel like it worked for this as it did with the video game, where it was like, cool, we have to introduce this in a very short period of time, and it worked. It wasn't like it ruined it for me. I just would have liked to see it in a very different way, but it was. I feel like both of them worked.
Yeah, so the subtlety and the development rather than going from like 0 to 60, but gradually building up to her levels of badassery. I could definitely see that as about it's an incredibly valid criticism actually, and I definitely can see that. Yeah, I get what you're saying with the need for audiences to kind of just pick up on her for, from the get-go. And if you haven't played the game, you're not going to know the difference. But yeah, I do like a nuance and subtlety when you're kind of trying to establish this character. I do think that obviously we are going to still see her get harder. As the season continues. But you're already starting at a 60 right now, so who knows what harder is going to mean by episode 9, right? So yeah, it's really good, really valid points. Kenji, what about you? Pedro and Bella.
Um, I definitely am very pleased with the performances that I'm seeing. You know, it's very obvious that they understand these characters, and and even with what's happening with Bella, her portrayal of Ellie, I feel like for all we know, what we're seeing right now is just a front. She's not really actually that tough because for all we know, like because, but it is also the other thing where it's like maybe this actually is where her character is because unfortunately we don't have what 48 hours worth of gameplay
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
to work with. We only have 9 1-hour episodes really to work with, so we got to do what we got to do. So I understand there's that, but it's obvious that even though they're not the exact same characters, the heart of those characters is there, and I feel like that's what they understand deep down is that these characters, they understand the heart of these characters, and it seems like that kind of seems to be the case with all the performers that we have so far, and I feel like that only really comes with the fact that the original guys from the game are are back to oversee it, and I feel like when you have that directness to the creators of the source material, I feel like it makes it a lot easier to work with, I'm sure. But yeah, I am excited to see where these characters go. I wonder how many side quests we're going to see play out
Mm.
in the actual show. Or are they just going to stick to just the main thing? And how much of that are they going to deviate? Because so far they're doing a really good job staying to the source material. So yeah, we'll see where this goes. I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm excited.
Me too. And you're right. I think having Druckmann there, to really kind of guide the characters and making sure that they stay true to who they are in the game, is incredibly valuable. I did hear that Pedro, for example, didn't know what the game was prior to being offered the role, and when they offered him, or they asked him if he wanted to audition for it, he talked to his nephews about it, and they're like, "Do it! You got to do it! You got to do Joel. He's freaking amazing. That game is so good, And that's kind of his intro. And then I think Bella, I don't think she played it. I heard an interview on Kimmel saying that she didn't really know it. So you got to think that if they didn't play these games, or if they weren't familiar with these games, having Druckmann there to kind of sell them on who these characters
Mm.
are, what their motivations are, and then to get them to do a performance that is very, very similar to what you get with Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, but maybe a couple of little tweaks for the audiences that are watching. it makes it all the more impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's like you guys are coming from a place where you're not that familiar with these games, and you're capturing the characters without having really done anything with them, or having had any previous experience with them.
So funny story, really quick.
Yeah.
I saw an interview this morning with Gabriel Luna, and they were interviewing him on this actually that just came out, and he said that so they had to go through production and all this stuff during quarantine, right? Like, because this is what was going on, and he was like, the interviewer asked him, "How did you get sort of the same timbre in your voice as Pedro Pascal playing the character?" And he said, "Well, what's funny is like we would call each other like over Zoom, and we would actually try to do each other's voice." And he was like, "That's how I got to sound sort of like him." And he said, "And what's funny is," he said, "I had no idea what the game was like going into this series, but then when I was offered it, they paid me to play the video game." So he was like, it was really cool to just like sit there and just like play video games for work and just to like kind of like figure out like what was going on. And so I think none of them really knew, what their characters were. And then they actually they got paid to like play a video game. And then all of a sudden here they are like doing these characters the way that like the video game either portrayed them or like did it. And so it's just really interesting to hear that. Because you don't hear a lot of that shit unless you ask him, right? Like Mike, I'm pretty sure you're like familiar with like, yeah,
yeah.
I know.
I got paid to
played.
play video games so I could study this character. You know how it is.
and then act it out, right? Like, and then just to fucking do it would be amazing.
I did get the opportunity, the really great fortune of talking to Gabriel about something similar, his experience with the game, on the nerdsofcolor.org, if you guys want to take a look at that interview. But he said the same thing. He said that he had seen people play it before, but he never bought it himself and he never played it himself. Then he was being offered the role and then they paid him to play it. And as he was playing it, it stopped being about the work and just started being about how lost he got in the game, how much he loved playing it. And that's the Last of Us effect, right? I mean, like the story and the characters are wonderful. They're beautiful, almost human characters. And that's the power of really good storytelling, no matter what medium, video game or television. And again, a testament to the potential that there is if you do a video game right, both from a television show perspective or a movie perspective. So fantastic first episode. We are officially out of time, but I want to let you guys say where everyone can find you and plug whatever you need to plug. Kenji, I'll start with you. Where can everyone find you?
Well, you can find me on my Instagram at Kenjinator. That's KENJINATOR. Also on Sundays, usually it's from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific time, but lately it's been a little bit earlier. It gets changed up, but I'm part of a Dungeons and Dragons campaign with my dad. He's the DM. That's actually what I'm repping right now. It's our shirts. It's called the Gatewalker Saga. We're just from, I think, like one of the expansions from Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, check it out. If you want to look for him, I'll actually put it in the chat. It's KD in LA. You'll find that on Twitch on Sundays. Yeah.
Nice. I love it. I definitely want to watch that. I've gotten into D&D in the past couple of years, and I know how hard campaigns are and how much planning takes, but also how fun they can be and how great and personal people can make characters and games and stuff. We'd love to see this. The Gatewalker Saga, everyone, please check that out on Twitch at KDNLA. So amazing. Thanks for that, Kenji. Jordyn, what about you? Anything to plug, and where can everyone find you?
God, nothing to plug. I'm not as cool as you and Kenji. So you can find me on Instagram at CityOfStars13. I post some wonderful, funny, lovely stories more than I post on my Instagram. And yeah, I'm just super into this nerd stuff, but I don't post about it. I'm usually just experiencing it. Like, I'm old school where I like go and I just experience it, and I don't like take pictures and don't do shit because I'm like, I want memories, but I need to record it. So but yeah, you can find me there.
How else will people know you're being legit though? How else will we know you're not lying, man?
I don't need to know I'm legit. I know I'm legit. I know for myself. Okay. But yeah, you're right. I need to like experience that and also make sure that everybody knows what's cool around here. So yeah.
I would argue with you, Jordyn, that you do have one thing to plug, which is that we'll be doing these Last of Us recaps on Nom Talk every week on Monday, whenever possible. Obviously, if changes happen, then you guys will be the first to know. But overall, it's a pleasure to be able to do this with you guys, to take this journey with you guys the same way that Joel and Ellie are taking it. And I'm looking forward to our next episodes as well, because this first episode was a doozy, and it's only going to get more crazy from here. I've been Mike Manalo. You guys can find me at TidyBowlBoy182, but also on the nerdsofcolor.org, that's at LA, and whattowatch.com. I've got some great Last of Us pieces on the nerdsofcolor.org right now, including my review. Gave the first season a very rare grade that I never dish out to anything, so hopefully that might entice you to check out that review. But also a nice interview with Gabriel Luna, who plays Tommy in this show. Definitely check that out. But overall, more than any of that, stay tuned to Nom Talk Network and Basic Binges. We've got a show, our next show, I believe, is, I want to say tomorrow. And I believe we're doing a recap of Final Destination 2. Oh, I'm sorry, on Wednesday. And the team will be doing a recap of Final Destination 2. So if you guys want to talk about some crazy deaths and logs flying everywhere, definitely tune into that, because it's going to be a hoot. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next week. All right? Take it easy.